late 19th and early 20th century cemeteries are very important to historians and human geographers alike, in that they can reveal a lot about a place, from the names of the people that lived in this location to the population of a place. For example, something that we can use is the spelling of last names and how those change over time. Sometimes last names change unwillingly due to the fact that their spelling was complicated, say from maybe Eastern Europe or Germany or France or Ireland, and they were not easy to say and they're not easy to spell for an average American in the mid to late 1800s when they came over here. So they would change their name quite often, or the way that their name was pronounced, so that they could fit in more, which unfortunately kind of can jumble up family ancestries. But another way that you can also utilize these cemeteries is that they are kind of a key to the past, in that you can also see who lived in a place, how many people perhaps, and maybe get a clue to their health. And that's the reason I chose Springer Cemetery today to video and to talk to you about some of the hardships that some of these coal mining communities faced back in their heydays of the late 1800s and the very beginning of the 1900s. The surprising thing about when I first visited this place is that there seems to be a lot of infants and young children from 12 and under who died very young, and also their mothers and sometimes their fathers as well, that died very young in their 20s or 30s. Upon doing some research, I did discover that the diseases that were rampant in this area really took out a large number of the population. It's something that's not very much talked about nowadays, and I think that's a shame, because so many of these people, they not only had to deal with their financial hardships, they also had to deal with each year the coming and going of various diseases like diphtheria, typhoid, smallpox, and several others. And it would come and go, and as many people know, in the spring and summer, when the bugs, just as they do now, as the mosquitoes and other insects come out, that would often spread the diseases much more rapidly. There's not many ways for people back then that were sick to get help, so I think that's another reason why so many people did die and end up in these cemeteries, is that doctors were few and far between. You have to keep in mind, these mining towns popped up very rapidly and would die off very rapidly as well, essentially. And so sometimes a doctor would be maybe a town away, or would be so busy in the town that if you lived on the outskirts of the town or village, you would have to wait a day or two for a doctor to show up. So quite often, whole medicine was the only way to take care of the people. And even if the doctor did see you, there was no antibiotics. The most common way of curing people was through bloodletting. And what that is the doctor would actually cut the wrists of the patient to let blood out. It was thought back then that that was releasing the blood and the quote-unquote bad blood out of the body with the disease, and that would help cure the patient. Unfortunately, we know now with modern medicine that does not work, and that actually weakens the body and increases the likelihood of death among the patient. So it was very difficult for them back then, and it's very difficult to kind of come to these places and to really study and look, because you see children that died a day old, to, like I said, 12 years old, and you see mothers and fathers. We actually just found, before we shot this, a family that lost an infant in 1873, and then 2 years later, in April of 1875, they both died, the husband and wife, within days apart, only in their mid-20s. So it was very dangerous to live in these places back then, and unfortunately, there's not, like as I said, there's not much that people could do. You just try to be preventative and cautious, but quite often, because of the unsafe and unhealthy conditions of living in a mining town and the contaminated water, immune systems were not very high as well. So this is unfortunately a sad and somber part of history that I think people need to talk about and people need to be aware of, especially when you come across these late 19th century cemeteries or early 20th century cemeteries. This is unfortunately part of life and part of the history of Appalachian, Ohio.